The grand ballroom of the Grand Belmont glittered with crystal chandeliers, expensive tuxedos, and the most powerful people in Boston celebrating Adrian Moretti's 40th birthday. Then, in the blink of an eye, the lights went out, panic swept through the room, and the city's most feared mafia boss collapsed after being secretly poisoned. While everyone else froze, one overlooked woman, a curvy single mother named Claire Dawson, risked everything to save him. But rescuing Adrian was only the beginning. Hidden beneath the glamour was a conspiracy reaching deep inside his own empire, and the woman everyone underestimated would soon become the only person capable of exposing the truth, saving his family, and changing his life forever. The crystal chandeliers inside the Grand Belmont shimmered above a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns as Boston's most influential guests applauded Adrian Moretti's 40th birthday. Politicians, billionaires, surgeons, and celebrities filled the gilded ballroom, while a string quartet softened every conversation. Near the medical station, Claire Dawson adjusted the emergency kit slung over her shoulder. Her plain navy uniform stood out among designer dresses, and Vanessa Hale's amused smile lingered after reminding everyone that support staff belonged in the background, not beside the city's elite. Claire ignored the insult. Her thoughts stayed with Lily, waiting at home, and with the patients she would see at St. Gabriel tomorrow. The lights suddenly vanished. Gasps swallowed the music. When the chandeliers flickered back to life, Adrian gripped the edge of the VIP table. His wine glass slipped from weakening fingers and shattered across the marble floor. 3 men wearing security jackets rushed toward him, insisting they needed to evacuate him immediately. Around them, confused guests stepped back while Adrian's own guards hesitated, trapped by the crowded ballroom. Claire saw what no one else noticed. His pupils had become uneven. His breathing had slowed. His lips had lost their color. "Don't move him," she shouted. One of the fake guards shoved her aside. She crashed against a serving cart but forced herself up, rolled the emergency stretcher across the hallway entrance, and blocked the only clear exit. Snatching an oxygen cylinder from the cart, she pushed past another attacker and reached Adrian just as his body collapsed. The ballroom fell silent. Working with steady hands, Claire opened the medical kit, found the antidote carried for rare toxic emergencies, and administered it while supporting his airway with practiced precision. Long seconds crawled past before Adrian drew a rough, desperate breath. Relief swept through the room. The armed imposters disappeared into the confusion as hotel security finally surrounded the ballroom, but Adrian never looked toward them. Still lying on the polished marble floor, he fixed his gray eyes on the exhausted woman kneeling beside him. His voice was barely stronger than a whisper. "How did you know? What poisoned me?" Claire looked at him for only a second before paramedics surrounded the marble floor. "Because I've seen the symptoms before," she answered quietly. "And if I'm right, someone wanted you alive just long enough to stop breathing in front of everyone." Before Adrian could ask another question, doctors guided his stretcher toward a waiting ambulance. Flashing cameras lit the hotel entrance while reporters shouted his name. Not one of them asked for hers. By sunrise, every television inside St. Gabriel Medical Center replayed the dramatic rescue. The headlines praised Adrian Moretti's survival. Claire appeared only as a blurred figure labeled hospital staff. A shorter clip showed her pushing past security, making her look reckless instead of prepared. Her supervisor folded his arms. "You violated protocol." "I saved a patient." "You embarrassed the hospital." Claire lowered her eyes but refused to apologize. Later that afternoon, a nervous young resident quietly caught up with her outside the pharmacy. "Ms. Dawson," he whispered, checking the hallway first. "The antidote you used, it matches a restricted research compound. We were told those medications were sealed years ago." He slipped a handwritten batch number into her hand before walking away. That evening, Claire climbed 4 flights of worn stairs to her apartment in Dorchester. The heater rattled without producing warmth. Lily slept beneath 2 blankets, hugging a faded stuffed rabbit. Claire smiled, reheated the last bowl of soup, then carried half of it next door to Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly widow, who rarely admitted she had skipped dinner again. "You always take care of everybody else," the old woman said softly. Claire simply smiled. "Someone once did the same for me." An hour later, headlights washed across the apartment windows. Black SUVs rolled silently onto the narrow street. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Conversations stopped. Car doors opened in perfect unison. Claire looked down from the window, already knowing who had come. When Adrian Moretti stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, she opened the apartment door before he could knock. "If you're here to buy my silence," she said calmly, "you came to the wrong home." The cold night settled between them. Adrian glanced past her shoulder, noticing peeling wallpaper, a tiny kitchen, and a child asleep on a worn sofa beneath a patched blanket. Nothing inside the apartment resembled the world he ruled. "I didn't come to silence you," he said. "I came to thank you." Claire folded her arms. Power usually says thank you with a check. He motioned toward the briefcase one of his men carried. "Your mortgage, your daughter's medical bills, a new position at St. Gabriel. They're yours if you want them." She didn't even look at the case. "No." The answer surprised every bodyguard on the narrow porch. Adrian studied her face. "Do you know how many people would accept that offer without thinking?" "I do." Claire met his eyes without hesitation. "That's why I won't." For the first time in years, someone had refused him without fear or anger. "If not money," Adrian asked quietly, "what do you want?" Claire disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a folded newspaper. She pointed to a photograph showing paramedics surrounding him at the gala. "The antidote I used shouldn't have been necessary," she said. "I've seen patients react the same way before. Different names, different stories, same symptoms." His expression hardened. "I need access to the batch records from the medication served that night. Every vial, every shipment, every storage report. My investigators already. They're looking for who attacked you." She gently shook her head. "I'm looking for who poisoned you." Silence filled the apartment. From the sofa, Lily stirred awake, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mom?" Claire smiled instantly. "It's okay, sweetheart." The little girl looked at Adrian for several seconds. "Are you the man who almost died?" A faint smile touched Adrian's face. "I suppose I am." "You look tired." "I haven't slept." Lily nodded wisely. "My mom says people who don't sleep stop seeing what's right in front of them." The words landed harder than any accusation. Adrian slowly accepted the truth hidden inside a child's honesty. He reached into his coat instead of the briefcase and placed a thin, confidential folder on the kitchen table. "If you're right," he said, "this may answer your first question." Claire opened it after he stepped toward the door. Across the top page, one name froze her in place: Sophia Moretti. Claire slowly lifted the folder from the kitchen table while Adrian stood quietly near the doorway. The first page showed a smiling young woman in a white hospital coat. The second listed cardiac trial records from St. Gabriel Medical Center. The final pages contained laboratory reports signed by one physician, Dr. Malcolm Reeves. "I've read this file 100 times, Adrian said. "Every investigation reached the same conclusion. My sister died from an unexpected complication." Claire studied the medication chart without answering. Years of reviewing emergency reports had taught her that the smallest detail often carried the greatest truth. "The dosage timeline doesn't fit," she finally whispered. Adrian looked up. Someone changed these records after they were written. The next morning, they met inside Moretti Holdings, where glass walls overlooked Boston Harbor and gray waves rolled beneath the winter sky. Senior executives filled the conference room while Reeves calmly presented an internal review of hospital safety. Every graph appeared flawless. Every conclusion sounded reassuring. Claire remained silent until the presentation ended. "May I ask 3 questions?" The room turned toward her. She pointed to a chart projected on the screen. "This mortality percentage excludes patients transferred within 48 hours. A second document. "These inventory numbers don't match the pharmacy reports." Then she held up Sophia's file, and this signature was scanned onto a document created 2 days after Miss Moretti died. Silence settled over the boardroom. Several executives exchanged uneasy glances. Reeves smiled politely. "You're making serious accusations based on assumptions." "No," Claire answered evenly. "I'm comparing facts." Adrian watched every face around the table. No one challenged Claire's evidence. No one supported it either. After the meeting, Reeves walked calmly through a restricted pharmacy corridor with his assistant close behind. "Delete Project S-17, he said without slowing. "Everything." Meanwhile, Marcus, Adrian's security chief, entered the surveillance office. "We found footage from the night before the gala." The monitor displayed Reeves unlocking the medication vault shortly after midnight. Marcus frowned. "That's impossible." He said he wasn't even in the building. The image suddenly skipped. 10 crucial seconds dissolved into digital static. When the recording returned, Reeves was gone. Someone had erased exactly the part Claire needed most. Adrian looked at the frozen screen, then towards the office window where Boston's skyline disappeared beneath gathering storm clouds. For the first time, he wondered whether his sister had died from far more than bad luck. The question followed him for days. Instead of returning to his penthouse each evening, Adrian found excuses to visit St. Gabriel. Officially, he was reviewing security after the gala. In truth, he wanted to watch the woman who had challenged every certainty he possessed. Claire never noticed. She greeted every patient by name, remembered which grandfather preferred tea instead of coffee, and quietly comforted frightened families while physicians hurried past. When a young nursing intern was publicly blamed for a scheduling mistake she had not made, Claire calmly presented the original records, protecting the embarrassed young woman without humiliating the senior doctor responsible. Later that afternoon, she slipped cash into the cafeteria register to cover dinner for the parents of a little boy waiting for heart surgery. She walked away before they realized who had paid. From the second-floor observation window, Adrian saw everything. "You could announce what you do," Marcus said quietly. Claire shook her head from below, unaware she was being watched. "Kindness isn't supposed to come with a receipt." The words carried farther than she intended. The next morning, Adrian invited Claire to join the hospital's safety review committee. "I'll accept," she replied, "under one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "No employee gets punished for telling the truth. Every report stays outside the internal system until it's verified." Several executives looked offended. Adrian simply nodded. "Done." It was the first time anyone inside the room had negotiated with him instead of obeying him. That evening, Lily underwent another round of cardiac testing. Adrian arrived alone. No motorcade, no bodyguards inside the treatment area. He waited quietly beside the hallway windows while nurses prepared the equipment. When Claire stepped out, he didn't ask how long the procedure would take. Instead, he asked, "What do you need?" She looked at him with genuine surprise. "Just let the doctors do their jobs." He did. Hours later, as Lily finally fell asleep, Adrian remained in the uncomfortable waiting room chair. Across the hallway, Vanessa Hale stepped out of the elevator carrying flowers. She stopped cold. Through the glass, she watched the most feared man in Boston asleep, with his head resting against the wall outside Claire Dawson's daughter's room. The flowers slowly slipped from her hand. For the first time, Vanessa realized Claire was no longer simply a hospital employee. She had become someone Adrian Moretti was willing to wait for. That realization settled into resentment. A week later, the annual Moretti Foundation Heart Gala transformed the Grand Belmont into a sea of white roses and crystal lights. Claire attended only because the foundation wanted a hospital representative, and the only formal dress she owned had been borrowed from a retired nurse who insisted it still deserved one more elegant evening. Vanessa greeted her with a polished smile that carried no warmth. "A beautiful dress," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "It's amazing what gratitude can do for someone's wardrobe." A few people laughed. Claire simply thanked the elderly volunteer who had helped pin the hem and continued toward the reception hall. Moments later, she noticed a young waiter struggling with an overloaded tray near a section of polished marble glistening with spilled water. Before anyone else reacted, Claire took the tray from his shaking hands, found a maintenance attendant, and quietly dried the floor herself. Seconds later, an elderly donor crossed the same spot without slipping. No applause followed. Claire preferred it that way. Inside the ballroom, Adrian watched from across the room. He saw Vanessa's remarks, Claire's silence, and the quiet dignity with which she walked away. The contrast unsettled him more than any argument could have. While guests gathered for the evening presentation, Dr. Malcolm Reeves slipped into a restricted office above the ballroom. His assistant inserted a security key into the hospital network. "Upload the revised pharmacy report," Reeves ordered calmly. "The forged records?" "Immediately." Downstairs, the lights dimmed as a giant screen illuminated the stage. Vanessa welcomed the audience with flawless confidence before announcing a tribute honoring excellence in medical care. Then the first image appeared. Hospital security footage showed Claire entering the medication storage room on the night of Adrian's birthday. Another clip followed. Then another. Each one had been carefully edited to suggest she had accessed restricted medication shortly before the poisoning. Whispers swept through the ballroom. Several board members slowly turned toward Claire. The borrowed white dress suddenly felt heavier than armor. She stood completely still, knowing she had never entered that room. Across the hall, Adrian looked from the screen to Claire. For one painful heartbeat, uncertainty crossed his face. Claire saw it. That single moment hurt more than every whisper echoing through the ballroom. She had faced cruel jokes about her weight, quiet prejudice, and years of being overlooked. None of it compared to seeing uncertainty in Adrian's eyes. Vanessa stepped onto the stage with practiced grace. "Until this matter is resolved," she announced, "Miss Dawson is being suspended from all hospital responsibilities." Two security officers approached. One silently held out his hand. "Your employee badge." The ballroom filled with camera flashes. Claire unclipped the badge she had worn for 11 years and placed it in his palm without protest. She refused to let anyone see her hands shaking. Adrian finally walked toward her. "Claire." She stopped him with a quiet look. "Do you believe I did it?" He hesitated, only for a heartbeat. But that heartbeat answered everything. "I need time to verify the evidence," he said carefully. Claire smiled sadly. "I stood between death and your heartbeat without asking who you were." She gently placed Sophia's confidential file against his chest. "And today, you couldn't stand between me and one lie." The words landed harder than any accusation. She turned and walked toward the elevators while reporters shouted questions behind her. No one followed. The elevator doors closed, leaving Adrian staring at his own reflection in polished steel. Marcus stepped beside him. "Sir, the footage could have been altered." Adrian didn't answer. His silence felt heavier than the crowded ballroom around him. Outside, rain had begun to fall across Boston. Claire drove home with the windshield wipers barely keeping pace with the storm. She replayed every conversation with Adrian, wondering whether trust had ever truly existed or whether she had mistaken gratitude for faith. When she reached her apartment, Lily greeted her with a tired smile. My medicine tasted funny tonight, the little girl whispered. Claire's heart tightened. She took the bottle from the kitchen counter. The label looked identical. The seal looked untouched, but one faint chemical smell stopped her cold. Within minutes, Lily's breathing became shallow. Claire called emergency services while holding her daughter close. Red and blue lights reflected across the rain-soaked street as the ambulance rushed them toward St. Gabriel. Inside the emergency room, doctors surrounded Lily. Claire stood frozen outside the treatment doors, still clutching the medicine bottle. A physician emerged only moments later. Mrs. Dawson, he looked down before meeting her eyes. Those pills weren't the medication we prescribed. Someone had replaced every tablet inside the bottle. Claire felt the emergency room tilt beneath her feet, but she refused to panic. Panic stole seconds, and seconds could cost Lily everything. "Save my daughter," she whispered. "I'll find whoever did this." The cardiologist hurried back through the swinging doors as alarms echoed inside the intensive care unit. Claire remained outside, clutching the orange prescription bottle until her fingers turned white. A familiar voice broke the silence. "Claire." She turned to find Adrian standing alone at the end of the corridor. He had left his security team behind. "I know what happened," he said. "No." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. "You know what happened to you. This happened to my child." Adrian stepped closer. "I've already sent people to find whoever replaced the medication." She shook her head. "You still think this can be solved by making people disappear? They hurt Lily, and I want the truth, not revenge." The words stopped him. For the first time, Adrian realized she wasn't asking him to be powerful. She was asking him to be better. Within an hour, he called an emergency press conference from the hospital lobby. Cameras flashed as reporters crowded around him. "I made a mistake," Adrian said, without reading prepared remarks. "Claire Dawson acted with courage when I doubted her. Effective immediately, every accusation against her will be reviewed by an independent investigative team." Gasps spread through the room. He continued. "Dr. Malcolm Reeves and the entire executive board of St. Gabriel are suspended pending that investigation. Every medical record and pharmacy log will be preserved." Watching from the hallway television, Claire saw something she had never expected. He was risking his own reputation to protect hers. Late that evening, Lily's condition stabilized. As Claire finally sat beside her daughter's bed, her phone vibrated. "Unknown number," she answered cautiously. A frightened woman whispered through broken breaths. "My name is Megan Price. I used to work under Dr. Reeves." Claire sat upright. "I know what happened to Sophia Moretti." The woman paused as if checking whether someone was listening. "She didn't die because of surgical complications." Another long silence. "She died because she tried to expose what they were doing." The call ended before Claire could ask another question, leaving only the quiet hum of hospital monitors and a secret powerful enough to change everything. Claire stared at the dark phone screen until it reflected her own exhausted face. Somewhere inside the intensive care unit, Lily's heart monitor kept a slow, steady rhythm. It was the only sound that mattered. An hour passed before the surgeon stepped into the hallway. "She's stable," he said gently. "The crisis is under control, but she'll need corrective surgery as soon as she's strong enough." Claire closed her eyes in relief. When she opened them again, Adrian was still there. He had not left. He had not answered business calls. He had not summoned another convoy. He simply sat across the corridor beneath the cold fluorescent lights, his expensive suit wrinkled, untouched coffee growing cold beside him. "You should go home," Claire whispered. "I don't think I deserve to." She looked at him for a long moment before sitting beside him. Neither spoke. Outside, snow drifted across the hospital parking lot, covering the black cars waiting below. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. "I believed Malcolm Reeves because believing him hurt less than questioning my own family." His voice carried no authority now. After Sophia died, he told me there was nothing anyone could have done. I accepted it because the alternative meant admitting someone betrayed her inside a hospital carrying my name. Claire listened without interrupting. My empire couldn't save the only person who mattered, he continued quietly. So I buried the questions with her. Claire rested her hands together. Power doesn't protect people from grief, she said. It only gives them more places to hide from it. He lowered his head. I failed my sister. You failed to keep asking. The words were painful, but they held no anger, only truth. Their hands rested inches apart on the waiting room bench. This time, Claire reached across the space first. Her fingers touched his for only a moment. It wasn't forgiveness. It was permission not to carry the burden alone. Just before dawn, a cardiac technician hurried from Lily's room holding a small monitoring device. We found something unusual. Claire and Adrian followed him to the workstation. The technician enlarged the recorded data. The medication wasn't intended to stop her heart. Claire frowned. Then what was it for? He highlighted a sequence of precisely timed reactions. It was designed to trigger a predictable emergency, one that would require transferring Lily into operating room 7. Adrian's expression darkened. Who controls that operating room? No one answered immediately. They didn't have to. Every eye in the room turned toward the name printed at the top of the department schedule. Dr. Malcolm Reeves. No one spoke. Claire looked from the monitor to Adrian. The answer had been hiding in plain sight since the birthday gala. It was never about Lily, she said quietly. Adrian frowned. Claire pointed to the carefully timed spikes on the monitor. These reactions weren't meant to kill her. They were meant to guarantee she would be moved into operating room 7. The room Reeves controls, Adrian finished. Marcus rushed in, carrying a tablet. Sir, the independent auditors found something. He placed it on the counter. Claire scanned the shipment records. The same research compound used at the birthday gala had been delivered to St. Gabriel months before under a classified authorization signed by Reeves. Then another detail caught her eye. The dates, she whispered. What about them? Adrian asked. Claire lined up the files from Sophia's trial, the poisoned medication at the gala, and Lily's altered prescription. They're all rehearsals. The room fell silent again. The birthday attack wasn't designed to kill you, she continued. Someone wanted to measure how your body reacted, how your security responded, and how I would intervene. Marcus looked stunned. So, the gala was a test, Claire finished. Before anyone could answer, another discovery appeared on the tablet. Vanessa Hale had approved emergency edits to the surveillance archive only hours after the gala. Adrian closed his eyes. She helped frame you. She helped, Claire replied, but she wasn't planning this. Her voice remained calm. She's protecting someone she trusts. At that moment, a forensic technician hurried into the corridor carrying a recovered backup drive. We restored a deleted voicemail from Sophia Moretti. Adrian's breathing stopped. The recording crackled before Sophia's voice filled the room. If anything happens to me, Malcolm isn't acting alone. Someone on the Moretti board is selling confidential patient records to pharmaceutical companies. Don't let Adrian trust family over facts. The message ended abruptly. Marcus checked another encrypted file. His expression changed instantly. It identifies financial transfers. From who? Adrian asked. Marcus swallowed. Julian Moretti. The name landed like winter ice. His own uncle. The man overseeing most of the family's legitimate businesses. Before Adrian could process the betrayal, every light inside the cardiac wing flickered once. Then, everything went dark. Emergency alarms echoed through the hospital. Monitors switched to battery power. Marcus's radio burst to life. Security lockdown. Operating rooms are sealed. A text message appeared on Adrian's phone from an unknown number. If you want the little girl to live, come alone. Signed, Dr. Malcolm Reeves. Adrian stared at the message for only a second before slipping the phone into his pocket. I'm going. Claire caught his arm. That's exactly what he wants. Emergency lights bathed the hospital corridors in red as nurses hurried frightened patients toward backup care units. Elevators froze, security doors locked with a metallic thud. Fear spread faster than the darkness. Marcus reached for his radio. We can force our way in. Claire shook her head. No, Reeves knows your tactics. She looked toward the housekeeping hallway. But he doesn't know mine. Within minutes, people Adrian had barely noticed for years quietly gathered around Claire. A maintenance supervisor unlocked forgotten service passages. 2 veteran nurses rerouted emergency power to the cardiac floor. A janitor who had watched Claire bring him coffee every winter morning handed her an old master key that still opened the utility corridor behind operating room 7. They'll never expect this route, he said. Adrian watched in silence. Power had built his empire. Kindness had built hers. The hidden corridor led them behind the surgical wing. Through a narrow observation window, they saw Reeves standing beside Adrian Moretti. Medical monitors surrounded Lily's empty operating room, while computer drives and patient files lay stacked on a stainless steel table. So she was never here, Marcus whispered. It was another distraction, Claire replied. Suddenly, Megan Price stumbled from a storage room, her wrists bound, but her voice unbroken. They're copying every research file, she cried. Julian reached for the backup drives. Once these disappear, no one proves anything. Adrian stepped through the doorway. It's over. Reeves smiled calmly. No, Adrian. It finally begins. For one long moment, Adrian's hand rested near the pistol beneath his jacket. Claire slowly walked past him. If you pull that trigger, she said softly, everyone will remember the gunshot instead of the truth. He looked at her, then removed his hand. Marcus immediately connected the recovered server to the hospital's emergency network. Across the building, conference room screens flickered to life. Reeves's financial records, Julian's transfers, Sophia's final voicemail. Every document appeared before federal investigators already waiting downstairs. Police officers flooded the corridor. Julian lowered his head. Reeves closed his eyes. Neither man had anywhere left to run. As officers placed them in custody, Julian looked back at Adrian with a bitter smile. You can expose all of us, he said quietly. But the moment you do, the Moretti Empire dies with me. The hallway fell silent. Adrian knew he was right. Now he had to choose what was worth saving. The silence inside St. Gabriel lasted only a heartbeat. Then Adrian looked at the federal agents waiting beside the shattered conference room doors. Take every file, he said, every account, every shipment, every record carrying my family's name. Marcus stared at him. Sir, if you do this, I know. His empire would never survive the truth. Claire watched without speaking. She had spent months asking him to choose honesty over power. Now, at the only moment that truly mattered, he finally had. Weeks turned into months. News reports filled every television across Boston. Dr. Malcolm Reeves received multiple criminal charges. Adrian Moretti lost every position he held and faced trial beside the executives who had hidden the illegal research program. Families who had spent years searching for answers finally received them. Adrian dissolved every remaining illegal operation connected to the Moretti organization. He sold luxury properties, closed shell companies, and created a compensation fund for patients harmed by the hospital's corruption. Many people called him a fool. For the first time in his life, he didn't care. Claire was offered her old position at St. Gabriel. She smiled and declined. Instead, she opened the Sophia Dawson Office for Patient Advocacy, where nurses, technicians, and support staff could safely report medical misconduct without fear of losing their jobs. The first people through its doors were not executives. They were the invisible workers she had always believed mattered most. 6 months later, Lily raced through a small community garden, her laughter replacing the sound of hospital monitors that had once haunted every night. Adrian arrived carrying nothing more than a paper bag filled with fresh pastries from a neighborhood bakery. "No bodyguards?" Claire asked with a smile. "They're learning I can walk across 1 block by myself." "And the expensive gifts?" "I finally realized you never wanted those." She laughed softly. "No." He looked at her with quiet certainty. "I only want to earn the next conversation." That autumn evening, the Moretti Foundation reopened under new leadership with a single purpose: protecting patients instead of protecting reputations. Standing before doctors, nurses, families, and reporters, Adrian didn't speak about courage or sacrifice. He simply invited Claire onto the stage. "This is Claire Dawson," he said. "She didn't just save my life. She reminded me that power means nothing unless it protects people no one else notices." The room rose in applause. Later, beneath warm lights in the now quiet ballroom where their story had begun, Adrian offered Claire his hand. "Not to lead you," he said, "just to walk beside you." This time, she didn't hesitate. She took it. Together they stepped toward a future built not on fear, but on truth, trust, and the simple kindness that had changed an empire forever. When Adrian stood before the entire city and introduced Claire Dawson not as the woman who saved his life, but as the woman who changed the way he saw people, he finally became the man his sister Sophia had always believed he could be. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. This story reminds us that real trust isn't created by promises or power. It's earned through the choices we make, especially when telling the truth costs us something. Today, think about someone who has quietly stood beside you the way Claire stood beside Adrian. Don't wait for a crisis to let them know they matter, because the strongest relationships are built one honest act at a time. Have you ever met someone who completely changed your first impression? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if Claire and Adrian's journey meant something to you, don't miss the next story, because sometimes the most unexpected meeting changes a life in ways no one could ever imagine.